Hello everybody, welcome back to the series analysing the science claims of the Dawahwise Dispelling Darwinian Doubts episodes. We are resuming at the start of the guest Q&A session.
If I quite get it, you're saying that if I analyze the Darwinian evolution or new Darwinian evolution in the terms of science, in the terms of the evidence they give, I won't be able to, refute them. So you're saying to me, in order to do it, you have to study the philosophy of science is the best way to do it?
Yes and no.
All right.
Firstly, what I mean yes by is you have to, if you try and just say there are problems, for example, there's problems with the interpretation of the fossil record, you go to the Cambrian explosion, there's problem in terms of the way that they build these genealogical trees through orphan DNA, whatever. The problem is you'll be asked, okay, what's your alternative? And you won't really have an alternative, right? Or if you haven't.
There were connection issues in the original video, but Sabor admitted that there is no genuine scientific alternative to neo-Darwinian evolution.
John Fontaine wrote a really good comment, if someone can highlight that as well, while I carry on, about not going down a lizard hole, because it can end up being actually a lizard hole. So what I was referring to, brother, is that, so if you try and challenge the fossil record with the Cambrian explosion or genetics with orphan DNA or so on and so forth, you'll be asked, okay, fine, what's your alternative? And if you can provide an alternative, it's still going to be naturalistic, because we have methodological naturalism. It's still going to link human beings to non-human animals, right? Non-human primates, right? That's going to be there. Aslan, they'll keep linking human beings to other things. You can't have methodological naturalism and the idea that human beings appeared in the history of life out of nothing, ex nihilo. That's not possible scientifically. So if you challenge it purely scientifically, you're not really doing anything. Like, there's no other options. And the other point is that we're not there to refute Darwinism. This is very important to understand. It's not about refuting Darwinism. It's about refuting the idea that Darwinian evolution or anything else in science has disproved our religion. That's what we're refuting. We're not refuting Darwinism, because you cannot refute Darwinism using science.
So Sabor is saying that there's no point trying to refute neo-Darwinian evolution through science, because the alternative would still show a naturalistic mechanism and would still show human evolution with a common ancestry with other animals. To summarise, he doesn't care what the science says if the science is against his religion. We should therefore pay no further serious attention to any of his science claims.
And therefore, we use the philosophy of science to challenge the idea that science gives certainty.
No scientist ever said science gives certainty.
Then we use epistemic weighing, and we talk about the Quran having a high epistemic weight, and therefore science cannot disprove what is in the Quran, whether it comes to the birth of Isa alayhi salam, or the creation of Adam alayhi salam, or the parting of the sea, or the splitting of the moon, or anything else. Right?
He has admitted he places science on a lower epistemological value than tales of ancient miracles.
We're not actually trying to refute the theory itself, because the theory of Darwinian evolution is the best naturalistic explanation that is currently available. We had Eva Jablanka and all these other evolutionists who had a belief in Lamarckian evolution and Evo, Devo, and God knows what, all these alternative type things. And this is at the Royal Society in London. They're having this discussion amongst those who believe in the classical natural selection Darwinian view and those who don't and believe in these alternatives, natural genetic engineering, whatever it's called. They still had to say, we're not talking about God.
He is referring here to the meeting held at the Royal Society in November 2016 called New Trends in Biological Evolution. This was a discussion on what other mechanisms could work in addition to the neo-Darwinian processes. There was plenty of discussion, but there was no major sea change in evolutionary thinking. It was not as controversial as evolution detractors like to make it appear. The reason why they couldn't talk about God was because that is a supernatural claim and is therefore untestable and not part of science.
Because as soon as you start challenging Darwinism, they make that synonymous to challenging God. Bringing in God, right? That's how scared they are of theology, right?
Nobody is scared of theology. It's not part of science. The theory of evolution is constantly being challenged. Here's a list of upcoming evolutionary biology conferences. Why would there be so many conferences on evolutionary biology held in such prestigious locations such as the Royal Society, if biologists were scared of theology?
This is why there's so much aversion, and there's self-censorship. There's an excellent documentary online called No Intelligence Allowed. Have a look at that documentary. It's about how intelligent design proponents, whether you agree with intelligent design or you don't, look at the way they've been treated.
Is that the best you could do, Sabor? Reference the film Expelled, No Intelligence Allowed, which was totally panned by anybody who understood science. As for the claim of censorship of intelligent design proponents, to see through this nonsense, please read this article which shows that this is just propaganda by the creationist lobby and nobody has been censored for their views. I have linked it in the description. In fact, one of the main proponents of intelligent design, Professor Michael Behe, continues to work as a biochemist at Lehigh University, even though he has had to write a disclaimer saying that his opinions are his own and not endorsed by the university or the Department of Biological Sciences. The university also released a statement saying they respect his right to express his views, but that they do not endorse them and that intelligent design has no basis in science, has not been tested experimentally, and should not be regarded as scientific.
That the intellectual price of accepting these things is so high to the extent somebody who respects his own intellect and is honest with himself in pursuit of truth has to drop it.
After this start, this next guest just gives the argument from improbability.
So it is not like, for example, like Dawkins says, it's like we just need one small miracle at the beginning of life so abiogenesis happens and then life will take care of it. No, you go on with somebody like Dr. Tour, and you need a myriad of miracles to have lipids. You need a myriad of miracles to have a cell membrane. You need a myriad of miracles to have a chirality. You need a myriad of miracles to have this or that. And then even if you get bacteria, you need a myriad of miracles to go into eukaryotes. And you need then the same for flowers, and the same for sexual reproduction. So you need a huge lot of things for just abiogenesis to happen, and then for evolution to happen, and each and every single step.
Despite all this talk of miracles, he doesn't give any statistical data for why it would be a statistically unlikely event.
And even when somebody would go and throw at, for example, somebody threw at me the ERV argument, and I told him, ERV or not, we don't have enough offsprings. For example, we don't have enough primate offsprings, so that whatever you want to say, we don't have enough offsprings so that mutation can do anything, really.
ERVs are endogenous retroviruses which are inserted into the human and chimp genome. This video by the Stated Clearly channel explains it very well. I've linked it in the description. In summary, the chances of the endogenous retroviruses being inserted where they are in the two genomes entirely by chance, which is what would have had to have happened had humans and chimps never had a shared common ancestor, is this number. This is very strong evidence for human-chimp common ancestry.
I had, for example, a dialogue with Dr. Joshua Swamidass, and he was there advocating neutral theory. And he says, I know that Darwinian mechanism doesn't work, but maybe it's neutral theory. So I just confront him with this. Neutral theory will not explain novelty. It will explain coalescence related to mutations in the same species selecting from a variation.
Of course, he misquotes the American computational biologist Dr. Joshua Swamidass here. Neutral theory is one of the mechanisms of evolution. It does not suggest that natural selection is unimportant. I have linked this in the description. The rest of his argument is just more arguments from improbability and arguments from personal incredulity.
Because the real deal here is that God is the real answer, and God is the most straightforward thing. And then you have now accepted God. Let's now look at what is his final message, and let's now look at the epistemic weight of this or that religion, and whether each religion is self-consistent or non-contradictory.
So the reasons why scientists, like even Stephen Hawking, when he's coming up with his theories, and at the end of the day, he finds that it has to be God at the end of the equation. So he thinks his equation is wrong, so he has to go and reformulate again and redo it all over again.
Stephen Hawking was an atheist. Mansour is suggesting that Stephen Hawking's experiments led to the conclusion of God, so he therefore had to reformulate his experiments. Mansour suggests that Hawking was dishonest in his science. Mansour provides no evidence for this claim. Unless he does, we should assume that this is just another lie and slander.
When you ask a Darwinist for the evidence for the origin of life, the tree of life, or natural selection being the main driving force of life, they will say bacteria evolves, butterflies evolve. We can see this happening. So what they're doing is they're committing a fallacy of equivocation. They are using the term evolution to denote Darwinian evolution, and they're using the evidence for basic evolution, which was known before Darwinism, as evidence for Darwinism. So that is a fallacy, the fallacy of equivocation. This is one of the most powerful tricks that the Darwinists use to hoodwink people into believing that the theory is immutable, unchallengeable. So that's the first thing that we need to highlight. It is impossible to use the fact that we can observe evolution, and so did the ancients around us, and to use that for evidence for universal common ancestry, or the claim that blind naturalistic selection forces shaped biodiversity. So this is a complete and utter lie.
To summarize this segment, he is saying that when we have the undeniable observation of evolution, Darwinists, as he claims, takes that as evidence for Darwinian evolution rather than for non-Darwinian evolution. What he doesn't seem to understand is that when there are experiments to determine why the evolution took place, we can identify the genetic change causing the phenotypic change and the selection pressure acting on that change. This is the Darwinian mechanism. If he is claiming that the scientists lie and say that it is Darwinian evolution when it is not, then he needs to provide evidence to back up that claim. He has not done that. Secondly, this is another often repeated claim you make. Nobody says the theory is unchallengeable. I have shown many times how there are conferences and discussions on evolution. If the evidence is presented, then it will be examined, and if scientifically sound, be accepted.
The assumption, which again, this fits within the probabilistic part, the assumption of homology. Homology is an assumption that if two things are similar, they have a common ancestor.
The conclusion of a common ancestor would be the most likely one given the evidence. I have explained in detail homology versus homoplasy in my 4 videos of Sabor's discussion with the Muslim lantern. Please watch those for a full analysis.
And I really want everybody to understand how frustrating it is debating with a Darwinist, because they do not see, or they do not want to see, how circular of an argument they're making. Essentially, let's look at the first premise. Similarities are due to common descent. That's the first premise.
Okay.
The second premise, hey, look, genetic or anatomical similarities. These two things are similar. Conclusion from the two premises, therefore, this is due to common ancestry.
No, it's not circular. The first fact or series of facts is the similarities between species. Then there is a search for explanations as to why the similarities are there. Then after looking at the evidence, there is the tentative conclusion that the best supported evidence is for a common ancestor. Sabor then repeats his old nonsense about Francis Crick and Richard Dawkins believing in panspermia. I have debunked this many times, including in my video called Sabor Ahmed is Clueless about panspermia. Please watch that.
The original information that's in the cell, even though it mutates, you can't create new information if it's not there to start with. You can corrupt existing information, but you can't arrive at new information. And this is a big puzzle, I think, that nobody's really addressed.
This statement from Mohammed sounds like something straight from a Stephen Meyer book. New information can arise in the genetic code through mutations. Mohammed says even if it mutates, it would be corrupted. This implies that all mutations are deleterious. This is wrong as there are beneficial mutations. Any change in a genetic code is a change in information. Sabor then talks about orphan genes. I have already debunked this in my video called Sabor Ahmed is clueless about orphan genes. Please watch that for a full analysis.
Michael Roos published a book with Oxford University called Darwinism as Religion.
He then starts talking about Darwinism as a religion, obviously quoting the philosopher Michael Roos. In this article, Roos talks about the theory of evolution through natural selection, giving people a worldview that he himself finds satisfying. This is only possible if you stretch the definition of religion. I will link this article in the description.
The Nazis used it, and once they did use it, that's what led to a lot of the racist theories that were coming out of the best Western academic universities being curtailed. They hate it. Darwinists hate it when you speak up about the racist element of Darwin's ideas, what he mentioned in Descent of Man.
This is another often repeated slur to try and discredit evolution. It is irrelevant to the scientific basis of evolution, but I will address it. Darwin talks about bearing without complaining, the weak surviving and propagating. Sabor's other example was actually inspired by theology, with no mention of Darwin or the theory of evolution. I will link this article in the description.
The link between Darwinism and Nazism, the link between Darwinism and racist theories, these things are clear. Two quick resources for this. Richard Whiteheart has a book called From Darwin to Hitler. You can see the links there.
Richard Whiteheart is a fellow of the Discovery Institute. Academic reviews of this book are highly critical of his research and conclusions. Whiteheart is a proponent of intelligent design. Do you think, Sabor, that maybe this is a motive for him to discredit evolution?
Sapiens, written by Yuval Noah Harari. He speaks about Nazis using Darwinism, and that's why racism and social Darwinism stopped. And he makes it clear, even though he's an atheist and even though he's himself a Darwinist, that the reason why these racist elements and social Darwinistic elements ended was because of what the Nazis did, not because of scientific information.
Sabor is wrong here. I have Sapiens as an ebook. Harari details how the Nazis had a factually incorrect interpretation of evolution that corresponded better with their racist ideology. This racial theory has been debunked by biologists. Harari points out that science is neutral. Groups take science and misinterpret it based on their own beliefs and agenda. I will end the analysis here and resume in part 3. Thank you for watching, and let me know what you think in the comment section.